Welcome to the Writer Groupie podcast. I'm Kim Smith, the writing guru, bringing you discussions, insights, and insider details on planning, producing, promoting, and profiting as a writer. This is a podcast by writers for writers. You can find out more about Writer Groupie at www.kimsmithauthor.com. And here's the next episode of Writer Groupie. And welcome to another episode of Writer Groupie. And I'm here tonight with my good friend Travis Shortt and my dog Tinkerbell, who has decided that she's going to be a part of this show tonight, whether we like it or not. And Travis, thank you for coming back on Writer Groupie. Me and you talked before I guess it's been a little while, maybe a year or so ago, when I was doing Writer Groupie back on Blog Talk Radio.
Yes.
So this is our first time to meet via video, and I'm really excited about that.
It is a pleasure to be back. I enjoyed I think I was on twice when you were on Blog Talk Radio.
Yeah.
It's good to be back on. I always enjoy, it's fun booking my clients and getting them out there, but it's kind of nice for me to come on the shows occasionally and talk to some of the hosts and interact with them and the producers in a way that I typically would not be interacting.
Yeah.
So for having me back.
Oh, I'm just thrilled to death because I think what you do is so very vital to an author's, not just their reach in the industry, but that's very important though. But I mean, today, especially for a self-published author, you got to have a team. You got to have your cover artist. You got to have your editing staff. You've got to have your PR people, your marketing. You got to get the word out there stuff. And it's wonderful to DIY. I do a lot of that myself. However, there comes a time in a writer's career when they got to let go of some of the stuff. I'm hearing more and more about VAs, people doing the virtual assistant stuff. And so why don't we start by you telling us a little bit about what publicity is and what a publicist does?
Okay. When you start talking about what I do, it's actually kind of funny because even to my own family and friends, many times I have to try to explain to them what it is that I do. They don't quite get what a publicist does. But in a nutshell, what a publicist will do for an author, for an entrepreneur, for an artist, there's a variety of different clients that I work with and that publicists work with. What we do is we actually kind of manage the overall image, and the term that we use is brand, and that's kind of become a buzzword here in the 21st century. And for me, brand is kind of an umbrella type of term, and underneath that is your image, and it's your public relations, and it's your marketing, and it's your publicity, and it's your logo, and it's your slogan, and it's all of those things that really come together and really tell the world who you are. And so my job is to actually take your message to producers and radio hosts and authors, editors, news reporters, individuals in the media, and to present you to them in the best possible package to generate exposure, to get people talking about you, to get people learning about you so that they can then turn around and buy your book. And what I tell self-published authors is, if you self-publish, and I congratulate authors for doing that, that in and of itself, I think is a tremendous milestone in an author's life, is when they go from that idea to actually seeing it in their hands. They get that book, they get that first run, they get to see it, they see the artwork, they see the words, they see all of that. But the ideal situation is then telling people how to find you, because it's not like you're being published by Random House or Simon & Schuster or those
That's
companies
right.
that then do a lot of ad campaigns, and they put your information on television, radio, and magazines, and on their website, and there's this huge push to tell people what the book is. And if you're a self-published author, basically you use CreateSpace or a platform very similar. You publish the work, and then it goes up at Amazon.com. Well, the problem is, at Amazon.com, those books get lost. They get lost in the titles, they get lost in the genre, and it's really cumbersome when I tell self-published authors that if you really look at how many books are going to be published this year, it's really amazing, because in the self-published world, you're going to see about 1,052,803 books published in 2015. That's 2,884 titles every day.
Wow, that boggles the mind.
It really does. And when you start thinking about that, it's not just people that, for lack of better terms, have no name recognition, they have no track record, but you also have traditional authors now that are, when their contracts are coming up with publishing houses, they're not renewing those contracts with publishing house. They're choosing to self-publish themselves because they have a lot more control over the quality. They have a lot more control over the turnaround. And when you look at the traditional publisher-author type of business arrangement that's made, the publisher gets 70%, the author gets around 30, 80 to 20, 70 to 30 is basically the split. Well, if you flip that on its head, you become a self-published author, then you're going to look at 20 to 30% being your cost, and then you getting to actually keep that 70 to 80% on the other side, as opposed to turning it over to a publisher. So what I talk to all of the potential clients that come to me about is actually self-publishing, and then getting out there and trying to do the interviews, getting out there and getting the exposure, establishing themselves as the premier author in their genre, and trying to help them do that. And that's what I do. I spend all my time on the telephone, I spend all my time on the computer, booking individuals, pitching them, talking to editors, talking to hosts, talking to reporters, and generating the type of exposure that an author is going to need.
I think it's fabulous. Well, like I said, I really believe in what you do, and I think it's so important for any author today, but especially a self-published author, to remember that, you know, you can't be an island. Sometimes you have to have other people helping you.
You do, and it's funny because even individuals that I work with who've gone through a traditional publisher, and typically a low to mid-tier publisher, and that has nothing to do with the quality of the publisher. That's just they're not assignment issues for a Random House or one of the the top 15, top 20 publishers in the country. They've gone through a low to mid-tier publisher, and they've had that arrangement with the publisher where the book is published and there's a publicity department, but they're not working for this author because that author's not in that top 10, top 20 best-selling list. So the publisher still isn't putting the energy and the momentum in the machine behind the publicity. So it really falls many times to authors who have been traditionally published. They still have to do the majority of their promoting and their publicity themselves. So it really helps to have someone like me. I prefer it's me. There are other individuals out there, but I prefer it's me. You come to me, and I try to help you get the exposure that you need. And it's really, I love working with authors. I love seeing them, go from. I love when I get the author at the onset and they're early in the process. I get a lot of authors many times who've already got the book published and they've tried a couple of different venues and they come to me, and I love doing that as well. But it's really fun to start from the idea all the way through phase, and to help them come up with the cover and the tagline and all of the collateral that's used to help promote and market the book. So it's really fun to do that. But I love it. I really love helping the self-published authors because I do feel that they have been overlooked for way too long. When I started doing this back in 2008, being self-published was still at that time very much a no-no. It was still very negative. The publishing world, other authors, they look down upon it. Now you have traditional publishing houses who are starting self-publishing imprints so they can help the self-published authors because it's such a huge market. There's just so much creative material out there that they realize now that those individuals that they've been overlooking for way too long, there's actually the possibility for potential out there. One of my favorite recent stories of a self-published author is actually the book Silver Linings Playbook, which was turned into a movie with Bradley Cooper and Jennifer Lawrence. That was a self-published book. The guy who wrote it, he self-published it. He was fortunate enough to have an agent that was able to shop it to Hollywood. Hollywood picked it up. That is the exception to the rule, unfortunately. But that is one of those great success stories of a self-published author, actually not just having a best-selling book, but also seeing that book translated into another medium, which is film.
Exactly, and my goodness, wouldn't we all love for that to happen?
I would love for that to happen to my clients. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so if we were going to hire you and your firm to be a publicity part of our team, what exactly do we need to bring to you? What do you want to build our campaign with? What do we have to have ready, in other words?
Well, it's interesting you said team. I was interviewed a while back for an online article, and I broke it down into 4 different segments on self-publishing. And I said, when it comes to being a self-published author, you have to understand there is an I in TEAM, and it's you, the author. Most of the time, you end up being every single component of that team. You're the writer, the proofer, the copy editor, the graphic artist. All of those things end up being the author, as well as doing the publicity and marketing. What I've discovered, Kim, over the years of doing this is most self-published authors hold a 9 to 5 job. There's something that they're doing to pay the bills
I
while
know
they
I am.
while they continue pursuing that dream of being a published author. So to be able to use someone like me who comes along and really what I did was in 2008, 2009, I took the years that I had at that point, about 15 years in public relations, advertising, marketing. I've been the manager of an advertising agency. I still had a lot of contacts in the media. I took all those contacts and I started funneling them to self-published authors. And really, when an author comes to me, I love, as I mentioned, getting the author at the onset when they have the idea and they said, how can we build this from the ground up? Because I do look at it as a small business. I refer to self-published authors as the small business owner of the 21st century. I think you're going to see more and more individuals choosing to become self-published authors as a means of supporting themselves, whether it is a second income or whether it's primary income. And the term that's being floated around now is authorpreneur. I wish I could take credit for that term. I did not. I use it, and if I could find who actually coined that term, I would give them the credit for it. But I saw it sometime last year, and I love it because it does tap into both worlds for me. It taps into the business side of things. It taps into the creative side of things. When an author comes to me, what I need from that author is to sit down. We do an intake. There's a Q&A session. There's a lot of back and forth trying to figure out exactly where the author's coming from. For me, it's a very important component in the PR campaign to actually make sure that the author understands that when we start promoting them, we're promoting them as the brand. Because when you think about the types of books that you read genres and you read authors. It's not necessarily the title of the book that you're reading, but you're reading a genre, whether you like sci-fi, whether you like romance, or whether you like mysteries or thrillers or espionage. There's a genre that we read, and then we like authors in that genre. We like the way they write. We like the characters they create. So what I try to do is get authors to understand that when we start promoting, yes, we're going to promote the book, but the book really is a very expensive business card for them as an author. The book gets us out there talking about the book, but it really gets us talking about the author. And what I tell authors is the very first interview that you do, you need to be talking about book 2, whether there is one or not. You need to be talking about it, because the life expectancy of a book, when I book an author for an interview, that's the life expectancy. That radio host, that interviewer, that producer, that editor, they are focused on that book right then, right now. By the time that interview is over with, they've already moved to the next author, the next book, the next project. So the life expectancy of interest and the ability to promote and to publicize is very small, and it's getting smaller.
I agree.
It's getting shorter. It used to be, I could take an author and we could talk, about the same book for probably 3 to 6 months. We can't do that anymore. That book, after about a month of interviews, that book is old news, and already, like I said, there's 2,884 titles every day. There's a lot of books out there. There's a lot of things to talk about. But if you get an author, and I try to coach them on how to do interviews, the right way to answer questions. We come up with guide questions that they want to talk about. We put them out there. And turnaround time, there's a lot of programs, a lot of magazines, whether online or traditional, that I have a good rapport with, and we can pretty much start booking immediately upon signing an author. They can probably have, and they may not have an interview tomorrow, but they're at least going to have a date or some dates to choose from within the first 48 hours. I'll be able to call them back and say, we've got this interview lined up, you've got these dates and this time to choose from, just let me know which one you want and we can start booking. But there's a lot of really what I call self-revelation and soul-searching for the author. What is it that they want to see accomplished in the course of a PR campaign? The way that I do campaigns, I do month-to-month campaigns, and then we do 6 weeks to 6 month campaigns on publicity, generating, because as you well know, hosting a radio program like this, you're booking at least a month in advance, 4 shows a month, and many hosts and producers are booking 3 and 6 months. So if I sign someone today, it may be 6 months before we get them on that first radio program or that first TV program or that first magazine. It may be 6 months down the road before they do the first one. So there's that foundation building over 6 weeks to 6 months. And then, like I said, I do month to month. I have authors that come to have what's called an a la carte package, where they say, okay, I want to spend X amount this month, and I want 1 radio, 1 television, and 1 magazine article, and that's what I try to get them for that.
Wow. Well, you sure cover a lot of ground, Travis, and I know that your clients are thrilled to death to have you out there working for them. So, my next question would be, once they've hired you and you've started working for them, how long does it generally take before they start seeing some results of your efforts?
That is probably one of the hardest questions to actually start quantifying. There's a lot of different ways to gauge success, and that's what I tell authors. Do you want to sell books? Do you want to see your social media following increase? Do you want to see the number of Facebook followers, or your Twitter followers? Do you want to see the likes on do you want to see that go through the roof? How are we quantifying success? And so that's, with each author, it's very different sometimes. Some authors say, well, I want to sell books, I want to sell books, I want to sell books. Okay, that's great. Let's see if we can start quantifying those book sales. And that's fairly easy to do, because if you're using Amazon.com, you get fairly accurate, reliable, not exactly real time, but you're going to get those numbers fairly quickly. You're going to see when books are being sold. And so I tell authors, depending on the type of interview, I have one author, let me give you an example. There's a radio program called Coast to Coast AM. It's a paranormal themed radio program, one of the biggest in the world, 8 million listeners every night. I have one author that I work with, and basically he's on that program once, maybe twice a year for an hour, maybe 2 hours. In that hour to 2 hours when he's on that single program, he actually will sell enough copies of whatever, whether it's his books, his DVDs, whatever. He'll sell enough in the course of that 1 to 2 hour time frame that will float him for the rest of the year. So everything else that he does over the rest of the year is kind of gravy. Those sales from that one program, and for him, that's what's successful and beneficial. Another author who does relationship counseling, and for her, she likes selling the books, but she will tell you that she much would rather get, after a radio program or a TV interview, to have people contact her later and say, after I saw you, I did order the book, and we liked it, but here's how I saved the relationship. Here's what happened with my husband, with my wife, with my boyfriend, with my girlfriend. So when we start talking about how do you gauge success, when will we start seeing results? Well, a lot of that depends on how quickly we get you out there. A lot of it depends on the time of year. Book sales, typically, if you're just talking general book sales, and you're well aware of this, there's 2 spikes in the course of a year for book sales, one being right before summer vacation, the other being right before the holidays. Mm-hmm. So if you can get the author out there right before those two major peaks, then you're going to see some significant and quantifiable results. The rest of it tends to be almost what you would call maintenance. It's just continuing to keep your name out there, continuing to get people talking about you, continuing to get people coming back to your website, following your blog, following you on Facebook, following you on Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, whatever social media network that you're doing. So it really, that is one of the key components in that first questionnaire and that intake that we do with a potential client, is how are you going to gauge success? And how the client tells us they're going to gauge success, that's what we focus our efforts on, trying to get them to be able to actually see it and quantify it.
I have to ask you this because it's on my mind. What do you think is the most common place that authors see success today? I mean, I'm just curious. Do they see more uptick in social media follows and things like that? Do they see more sales? I mean, how is your efforts really starting to show up in today's market, especially with so many self-published authors?
I think, and this is what I have seen and what I've been able to gauge for clients, and this has been kind of a track record for almost 3 years now, that what you end up seeing is a jump in social media following, because authors are celebrities and they are personalities, and people follow authors because of, like I said, of the way they write, the characters they create, and people like getting to know them, so they follow them, they follow what they're doing. So you'll see that spike. The book sales across the board, even for traditionally published authors, kind of down. Those numbers are not what they were 5-10 years ago.
Wow.
And it's a very interesting time, I think, for authors. A lot of authors are choosing now to go the route of giving away several chapters, let people download, and then try to buy the book. A lot of people are giving away the books. One of my authors, every Christmas, she will do about a 2-week campaign where she gets on social media and she floods social media, and she will give away all 3 copies of her electronic copies of her book. If you follow her and you get online, she will just download them for free, and she has seen thousands of downloads of those books.
Yeah. I
And
think free is a good way to try and get your name out there and get your product out there. I keep hearing from different sources it's not as good as it used to be because there were so many people doing the free thing that some readers actually got into this mode where they wouldn't buy a book if it wasn't for free. And so now authors are starting to, kind of pull back on that because it's lost its effectiveness. And that's something that I think is true pretty much for a lot of things that we try as authorpreneurs is you got to try something, see how it works for you. Then you try something else.
And what may work for one author doesn't always translate to another author.
Right.
It's not always equitable as far as what type of gimmick that you're using to get people interested in your books. Electronic giveaways, those are great. You start trying to give away, hard copies, that's, that tends to cost you a heck of a lot more money and a lot more headache and getting it shipped and things like that. So I've had people try a variety of different things over the years, and a lot of them have worked, a lot have not. I've seen some things just fall totally flat when it comes to getting people interested in a title or a book. I've seen, authors go from, try to jump genres. They have a built-in following in a particular genre. They say, well, I want to try to do something else. And it just doesn't work because they just, and I think people saw that even with J.K. Rowling. She tried it. She finished out the Harry Potter series and then she tried a much more adult-oriented thing. It didn't work. It doesn't mean she's not a good writer. It doesn't mean she's not talented. It just means that she found her niche. She found the voice that she needed. And I think once an author finds that voice, they really need to stick with that voice. And they need to fine-tune that voice and do what they can to make that as profitable for them and successful. Again, ever how you're defining success. If they do, I think that's what they need to do.
And I'm probably a publicist nightmare because I am not a very well-branded person because I write in every genre. I'm working on a sci-fi right now. I've written YA fantasy. I've written romance. I've written mystery. I've done a little bit of everything, and every once in a while throw out poems. I do a lot of short stuff. And so I'm making myself crazy trying to figure out who am I as an author. But you know what? I'm really starting to see a lot more authors do this because the world is really our oyster. Mm-hmm. And all we have to do is just reach out and grab the pearl because, you can reach a lot more readers in different tastes. They like different genres. You can reach a lot more readers when you cover a lot more ground. And as a self-published author, you don't have a publisher, funneling you into that niche mentality. So what would you do for an author who's not branded and who doesn't know how to brand themselves?
Well, the first step, this is, I ask every author that comes my way, who are you? Who do you want to be? And who do your readers think you are? And I think when you start fine-tuning those three issues, first of all, you have to decide as an author who you are. And you have to decide where you're writing. And I think once you decide that, I am Travis Shortt and I'm going to write, paranormal-themed novels or I'm going to write paranormal-themed research books, once I do that, once I develop that audience, then I can actually start branching out and then I can start dabbling in other fields. And I think you have to establish yourself. I've got a gentleman right now. He's going to be on your show next week, Jerry Peel. He's the author of The Curious Case of the Conjure Woman. Jerry's very interesting because Jerry is British, but he lives in Virginia. So we've kind of branded him the Virginia Brit. He loves the Appalachian lifestyle. So here you've got a British author living in America, but he's writing about and he's living in Virginia, but he's writing about a region of Virginia that he is not from. But he spent a great deal of time there. So, you get this very interesting kind of dynamic going on. And he refers himself as a yarn spinner. And that's a term a lot of people don't really know anymore. But those of us, who've grown up over, in the 20th century and coming into the 21st century, we know what a yarn spinner is. That's someone who spins a good story. They tell a good tale. And somewhere in the course of that story, there's a moral that we're going to walk away with and that we're going to try to put into practice in our life. And Jerry has done that with his story, but it's very interesting because he's also an artist. He writes in a very interesting genre because it's a little bit mystery, it's a little bit romance, it's a little bit cultural, it's a little bit southern, and so you've got all of these different things that are coming into play, and so you have to decide, well, how do you brand that author? Well, you brand that author as being, here's the Virginia Brit that's an amazing yarn spinner. He's got this one story, and this one we're doing, a little bit more publicity. He published one book before this one, did that himself, self-published in his promotion. So now we're piggybacking. You've got two stories that we're talking about. You've got The Curious Case of the Conjure Woman, and you've got Q&A, a Moratico murder mystery, because he lives in Moratico, Virginia. So you've got these two stories that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. Neither one of them are the same. They don't have any of the same characters. They're not set in the same locations. They're totally different books. But it's still, it's one of those very interesting things. What we're taking is the character, the personality of the author, right, and try to translate that and find an audience. And it's very interesting. It's really like working with a small business, because you're trying to figure out, you open a store and you're selling X, Y, and Z. Who's your audience? Who's going to come in? Who's your clientele? Who's your customer base? How are you going to get to them? How are you going to get them to buy? How are you going to get them to come back once they've bought what you have? So it's a very interesting conundrum that it puts. But I love it, because there's always, a new way of helping authors present themselves. I'll tell you a real quick story. I know we're running out of time. I'll tell you a real quick story. I took an author back in 2012 who had written this kind of a, what I would call, it wasn't really a memoir, but it was more of a reflection on certain aspects of their life, probably 3-4 major aspects. And it was told against the backdrop of the Winter Olympics in Vancouver, British Columbia. And in talking to the author and talking with people that worked with them, we discovered that, there were really several interesting components in the story that weren't being featured. So we plucked out women's rights, and we plucked out adoption, and we plucked out bullying. And those are the 3 things that we focused on. And we started pitching those 3 ideas from this one retrospective, this one flashback over these 3 or 4 major incidents in this individual's life. What happened was, it was right about the time that the anti-bullying movement was getting very popular. It just kind of exploded and mushroomed, and ended up doing like a 15-state, 30-city media tour with this author, because the book was presented not as a memoir, not as a retrospective, but it was presented as a book that dealt with bullying, both as a child, from a child's perspective, and from an adult perspective, what this individual has gone through. And it was amazing to then brand them, not as an author, but as an anti-bullying expert, who simply happened to have a book that was opening the door and was getting them out there and getting them on, speaking engagements and media exposure, and working with anti-bullying organizations, nonprofit organizations. It just became this very, very big, much bigger campaign than what we had originally planned.
Wow. That's cool. That's really cool to have a book and an idea, and to take, snippets from it or segments from it, and to really work it so that it's, just profoundly accepted in a way you did never expect. I mean, I'm, as a fiction author, I have gotten one small nonfiction written that's a small self-help booklet that's done very well, and I see that there's a great market out there for people's, to motivate and inspire, and to get people to do what it is that their heart's desire is. So I can really appreciate that, and I'm telling you, I'm just so impressed with what you do. And if I was to want to hire you now, how do you charge? Do you charge by the hour? Do you charge by the month, by the interview? How do you do that?
The all-in-cart package is one that we have. Right now, there's only 2 ways that I'm charging clients right now. One is, I have a special that I started last year, and it was very, very successful. People liked it. It had a lot of response, and I'm going to keep it going for a while. I don't know how long it's going to be in place, but it's indefinitely in place right now. You can hire me to do an entire year-long publicity campaign. That's come up with your branding. That's weekly consults. That's letting booking your interviews. That's doing a little bit of media coaching, putting together your press kit, all of those things. It's a flat fee of $1,500. It covers the entire year. It's paid up front. And the nice thing, what authors like about it, is it's not just for one title. As many titles as you can spin out in the course
Wow.
of that year,
That's
then
awesome.
I will go ahead and do the publicity for them. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is the a la carte. And the a la carte package is based on the type of interview that you want, whether it's radio, whether it's television, or whether it's print, and then based on the viewing audience or the listening audience. And so it runs, because it's one thing to book someone a radio program that's going to have maybe 100 listens in the course of a month, as opposed to booking them on the Today Show. So it runs the gambit
Right.
of what it can. So the least amount that you're going to spend is like $100 to get an interview, and then it goes up into the thousands from there, based on the number of people that are going to possibly see that interview, based on Nielsen ratings for TV, based on Arbitron for radio, based on what the producers provide for radio shows. So you can choose. And the nice thing about the a la carte is it allows the author to actually budget for the month. They can say, I want to spend $500 this month.
Gotcha.
And then I book those interviews, and they just pay for those interviews. The $1,500 a month package is great for people who say, okay, tax return checks coming out, I'll take $1,500 and I want to pay someone to do the publicity for the upcoming year. Well, that you got 12 months. You're going to buy my time for 12 months, and as many titles as you can spin out in the course of that 12 months, I'm going to pitch you, and I'm going to get you out there and book interviews. So you got the $1,500 on one spectrum, and then you've got the choosing the interviews that you want, the platform that you want, and the audience that you want, and you can build it as you go.
Well, that sounds like a great deal to me. Y'all out there, if you're building your team, you need to give Travis a call, because that sounds like a deal to me. Now, we know what you do, and we know what goes into what you do. But tell us what you're looking for. What is your perfect client?
I've dealt with so many authors. I literally have worked with almost every genre that's out there, from young adult and children to relationships, intimacy, sex, self-help, psychic mediums, the paranormal, individuals who've gone through, horrible events. Bill Bean is one of my clients, wrote a book, Dark Force, very much like the Amityville Horror, The Conjuring, the traumatic events when he was a child, has come out as an amazing individual. I've worked with all of those. For me, the ideal author, the ideal client that I'm working with is someone who knows what they want to do. This is not something that they're just doing and throwing it together, a fly by the seat of their pants kind of person. This is someone who knows this is my passion, this is my dream, this is something that I want to see fulfilled. And what I try to do, the reason that I price my services as competitively and as inexpensively as I do, is I'm really looking for a long-term relationship with every author that I work with. I'm hoping to be able to be there all the way from the self-publishing to possibly getting picked up by publishers. Some of my authors have been picked up by traditional publishers, and I've got two right now that I'm shopping their books to film studios, trying to get those options. There's a lot of other things that I do along the way as I promote and as I publicize, and we're looking for that. Those authors that I can be there as part of the team long term. Not just one book, not just two books, but maybe a lifetime of publishing.
You want to be a career publicist.
I do want to be a career publicist. What can I say?
Exactly. Well, I'll tell you what, Travis, it has just been fantastic having you back on Writer Groupie with me. And, I would just love it if some of my fans, my followers, would leave comments. We want feedback for some of these shows, because it helps people like Travis who are in the industry providing services for authors to know what you need. What do you need? What are you looking for? Help me out here, Travis. What's some questions that people might, have that you might want to know about? What could somebody have question-wise that you could answer for them?
Well, if they want to find out, how, what's the first step after I have the idea for a book? What do I do next? How do I go about getting a publicist? I actually just did an interview for an upcoming article. They asked me, if you, and this was actually geared towards small businesses, but if you're an author, it's very true. How do you gauge if you want to use a publicist? There's a lot of people out there. I'm not the only one. There's a lot of people that have been put out of work from the marketing and the PR world who are doing freelance publicist work, just like I do. How do you find out if they're the right fit? Because not every publicist is the right fit for every author. You need to find out, is there going to be synergy? Is there going to be a working relationship? Is this someone who's going to take care of you, who's actually going to to put the effort into to booking the interviews and sending the information. It's so funny sometimes. I'll have my authors come up and they'll say, "Have you sent all the information to the host and the producer?" I'm like, "Yeah, here's the email. You've got everything. It was sent out 3 weeks ago. They've got the date, the time. They know the number to call you. They have your backup number to call. They have email in case they can't get it. All of those things. That's all the stuff that I take care of. So it really is. How are you going to put a team together that's going to be most advantageous for you, the author, so that you can actually see not just success, but how are you going to be able to say, okay, I'm not dealing with that, and I don't want to have to worry about it."
Yeah.
And I had someone ask me one time, they said, how do I know when it's time to hire a publicist? And my answer to that is, if you're asking yourself that question, it's time to hire one.
Very good.
If you're already saying, when do I need to hire a publicist? How much more work then you already need to be hiring someone?
That's right. That's really good. I like that. Well, okay, so tell the listeners and the viewers how to find you.
Easiest way, there are three places they can find me. Of course, my website is aspirecommunications.com. That's ASPYR communications.com. I'm on Twitter. My handle is just at Travis Shortt, 2 T's and Short. And they can find me on LinkedIn. Those are really the two primary social media sources that I use, are Twitter and LinkedIn. And then, of course, through the website, they can reach me there. My contact information, they can email, they can call, whatever they feel would be most beneficial for them.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on Writer Groupie tonight, Travis. And I look forward to having Jerry on. I'm going to interview him next week. He'll be on like the 17th, I believe, if I can get my producer rolling on those gears. And please feel free to contact me. Send me more authors. I'd love to have everybody that you work with to come on my show, because I know they're going to be quality folks.
I will get some more your way, and I know you're going to enjoy Jerry. And again, thank you so much for having me back on. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. Thank you for listening to this edition of Writer Groupie. For booking information, show notes, and more, visit KimSmithAuthor.com.